the Fox 29 studios, this is Good Day Philadelphia.
7:32. We want to get back to these major developments that we've learned about this morning in the search for the 4 young men who vanished in Bucks County.
We know one person has been identified. The other human remains have been found.
We have found human remains in an approximately 12.5-foot deep common grave that we have painstakingly dug with a lot of care so as not to damage any potential evidence. And I'm very, very sad to say that we can now identify Dean Finocchiaro, 19 years old, of Middletown, as one of the people that was found buried in that grave.
You were just listening to the Bucks County DA. Cadaver dogs led authorities to the remains deep inside of a grave in Solbury Township. And while this is happening, as they look for, because he mentioned that there were other remains, but they've not been identified just yet, the parents of the person of interest, Cosmo DiNardo, are expected to appear before a grand jury. So there's a lot of questions surrounding this right now. So we're bringing in our legal analyst, Ken Rothweiler, with more so we can kind of get a little bit more understanding. Good morning, Ken.
Good morning.
So first, let's start with the grand jury, because that's expected to happen about an hour or so from now. We have the person of interest, Cosmo DiNardo. Well, first, let's break down the person of interest and why they're calling him that, as opposed to a suspect.
Well, yeah, I think at this point he is a suspect. They may be saying he's a person of interest. A suspect is somebody where there's, you know, a little bit more proof and there's more suspicion. I believe he's been a suspect since Monday, and I'll tell you why. If we go back on Monday, he was arrested for unrelated weapons charges. So I think they suspected him then. What happened, though, is he got out on bail. He had $1 million bail, and you only have to post 10%. He then got out. I don't think they liked that because they suspected all along that he, that this is probably the person that did this in terms of these 4 individuals. So on Wednesday, yesterday, he was arrested for the theft of a car that was owned by Tom Mayo. He then tried to sell that car for $500 to some other friend. So they then arrested him again, and now he has a $5 million cash bail that right now he's in prison, and that's where they wanted him to be in jail. Because now what they're doing is they've impaneled this grand jury. The grand jury now is going to hear evidence to see whether there's enough evidence to now indict him for the murder of at least one of these individuals.
And that's where things get really interesting, because why grand jury? Why not? I know the parents are expected to appear today, this morning. Why not just have, I don't know, bring them in for questioning? Why does it have to be in front of a grand jury?
Well, because they're collecting evidence, so they want to see what the grand jury does, because the grand jury has the ability to subpoena people. So they're subpoenaing mom and dad, DiNardo's mother and father. They're going to ask DiNardo, I think, to probably come in too. He's represented by counsel. I think he's going to plead the fifth. I don't think he's going to give any information, but there's been a lot of surprises so far, so anything can happen.
So they think the grand jury is a surefire way to get the information they need.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think then they're going to ask the grand jury to make a recommendation. The grand jury then can make a recommendation to indict or not indict. And based on the evidence so far, from what we're hearing so far, it looks like there'll be an indictment.
They're going to ask a series of questions. Can anyone who's called before a grand jury, can they bring their legal counsel?
No.
Why?
No, because you're not allowed. That's just the grand jury rules. So you bring people in. It's basically the prosecution gets to ask the questions before the grand jury. The lawyers have to wait outside in the hallway. So that you're asked questions. That's because you want an honest discourse there in terms of giving the grand jury the information without a lawyer interceding. Because if a lawyer goes in, Thomas, you know what's going to happen? Don't answer that question. We're going to take the fifth. Which means that grand jury proceeding would be worthless.
When we look at this case, we're talking about it's now a homicide investigation. How does it lead from being a single homicide to a mass murder? Well,
because they have to find those, they have one individual identified, right? Now they're trying to find other individuals. That looked like a mass grave there. I mean, 12.5 feet underground. The canines found the one as the day goes on. I think we'll find out whether there's going to find any more.
So 4 more individuals, it's considered a mass murder. Does that change any of the charges, the penalties?
It doesn't really change the charges. I mean, if he's charged, he'll be charged with murder 1. It'll just be with one individual. If it's 4 individuals, there'll be 4 counts of murder 1. But look, the penalty's the same for all of them, so it doesn't really make much difference. But obviously, the families want to know because you've got a bunch of grieving and worried families out there not knowing what happened to their loved ones.
What is the legal process when it comes to searching? We're talking about 90 acres here when it comes to searching a private residence or a private property.
Need a search warrant, need probable cause. And they've
they have
established, oh, I think they got that very easily in this case. I don't think it was any problem at all to get a search warrant. Matter of fact, they're searching both properties. I guess there's one large acre tract and then there's another large acre tract. I'm sure they got search warrants for both.
So many people are asking on Facebook and social media, they're saying, right now we only know of one person of interest, Cosmo DiNardo. They're saying, is it likely that there might be other charges? Because it seems hard to believe that one person could have done all of this.
Well, that's true because, you know, you've got that 12.5-foot hole. And I guess the question is, did he do that himself? Whoever did it, did they do that themselves or was there help? Remember, this family, though owned a cement company that had, you know, backhoe diggers, heavy machinery and so forth. And this Cosmo DiNardo probably knew how to operate that machinery. So it's not out of the question that he could have done it himself. But that's one of the questions that the DA's office and the police are trying to ascertain, whether this was just one person or a number of people.
Okay.
We'll find out more in the investigation. We'll find out what comes out of the grand jury.
Yeah, it's a sad situation. It's horrifying for the parents, for sure.
You have to think of the families.
Yeah, you definitely have to think of the families here.
Good to see you, Ken.
Good to see you guys, too.
Of course, this story we're going to stay on top of all morning and throughout the day, so make sure you stay tuned to us for those updates. But we're going to take a quick break.